Critique. This submission synthesizes the archaeology of Herod's temple with the theological narrative of Jesus' temptation. Let's get right to it.
A really fascinating intersection. A lot to work with here.
Okay, so first up, a key theme here is setting the scene, but the environmental setting of the wilderness needs to be moved from an abstract concept to a physical reality. It's about heightening the stakes.
Right. Right now, the wilderness is treated almost like a theological green screen.
Exactly. It's just a blank backdrop for the fasting.
And it's missing that visceral, really gritty texture that was actually there in the research notes, about the geography of the Jordan Valley.
So the fix, I think, is to integrate the specific geological and political definitions of wilderness right away.
Ground the whole 40-day fast in physical danger, not just a spiritual metaphor.
Yes. So, for example, you'd replace the general idea of a desert
with specific imagery from the notes. It mentions rough limestone hills, scrubland, and caves.
And you have to explicitly reject that sand dunes stereotype.
Oh, absolutely. And don't forget the political tension either.
That's a huge point. The Transjordan and the Nabateans, that's not just historical trivia.
No, it frames the wilderness as a borderland, a contested space.
So Jesus isn't just hungry, he's isolated. He's in a zone of, animosity, separated from the settled Jewish lands. That physical isolation, it just perfectly mirrors the spiritual reality.
Okay, so that brings us to the second point. The archaeological density, particularly around the temple architecture, it's currently obstructing the narrative flow.
It is. It's getting in the way instead of enhancing the tension of the pinnacle temptation.
The draft just gets bogged down in these peripheral debates.
The Bar Kokhba coins, the Dur Europos paintings, the 500-cubit measurements.
It just stops the story cold, right before you hit the climax.
So the suggestion here is to, prune the architectural history.
Prune it way back and focus exclusively on the elements that help you visualize the specific danger, the height. You want to create a sense of vertigo for the reader.
Right. So as a concrete example, that extended comparison of the Bar Kokhba coin facade.
The whole flat roof versus pediment thing.
Yeah, cut it. It's distracting.
Instead, zoom in. Focus deeply on the southwest corner and the royal stoa.
And use that fantastic detail about the stone pavement below Robinson's Arch.
Yes, because that creates such a brutal contrast, doesn't it?
It really does. You have the satanic promise that angels will keep his foot from striking a stone
versus the lethal reality of that Herodian masonry waiting hundreds of feet below. That's the visual you want. That's what lands with impact.
Agreed. Okay, let's look at the narrative structure. The manuscript lacks a definitive editorial stance on how the temptations are sequenced.
And that leads to a muddled thematic climax.
It's sort of oscillating between Matthew's order, which ends on the mountain,
and Luke's, which ends at the temple. By trying to serve both, the narrative arc just goes completely flat.
The suggestion is simple. Pick a lane. Select one sequence based on the argument you actually want to prioritize.
Kingship or priesthood. And then structure the analysis to build toward that specific crescendo.
So if the goal is to highlight Jesus as the true Israel rejecting false dominion,
you stick with Matthew. Use the notes on Tote and Palin to argue it's a chronological climax on the high mountain.
And you can contrast the visual of all kingdoms with the Sermon on the Mount later in the Gospel.
Conversely, if your focus is on Jesus' identity as the priest or his destiny in Jerusalem,
then switch to Luke's order. Use the argument that Luke is deliberately centering the whole narrative on the temple.
And it foreshadows the destruction mentioned in Luke 21, the final conflicts there.
The key is not to just note the difference exists. You have to explicitly state why you are choosing a specific order to drive your point home.
Okay, final point. The theological connection between the three temptations and Israel's wilderness wandering. It's accurate, but it feels a little mechanical.
Yes, it needs to focus more on the results of the victory, the payoff.
Right now, the draft correctly lists the Deuteronomy citations, but it stops there. It stops short of explaining the functional result of that obedience.
It completely misses the concept of binding the strong man.
So we need to move beyond just matching verses to temptations.
The argument needs to be that this specific act of obedience is the very mechanism that, you could say, legally authorizes Jesus' subsequent ministry.
For instance, connect the refusal of the bread temptation not just to hunger.
but to that point in the source material about biting the strong man in order to plunder his house.
Exactly. You have to make the true Israel argument an active one.
Because he succeeded where Israel failed, the golden calf, the manna complaints, he now holds the authority to reclaim the nations that were shown to him on the mountain.
Right. Resisting the lust of the eyes and pride of life is what directly enables the plundering of Satan's goods, the redemption of sinners later in the text. It's cause and effect.
So, to recap, to really strengthen this piece, ground the wilderness in that rocky political reality.
Streamline the temple architecture to focus on hike and pure danger, not numismatics.
Commit to a specific narrative sequence, Matthew or Luke, to sharpen the climax.
And finally, activate the theology of binding the strong man to show the consequences of the victory.
These are some sharp narrative choices that could really elevate the work.
We look forward to seeing the revised draft.